Look, cosmologists are prone to being wrong just as anybody else is. When it comes down to the evidence of what Scripture says and versus the point that you brought up about the 6,000 years old, I would say that Earth is at least 6,000 years old.
Testimony. How old do you think the Earth is?
I would say, based on the biblical evidence, at least about 6,000.
So I would agree that it's at least 6,000 years old. I think the distinction, though, is that you probably think it's not 4.5 billion years old, right?
I wouldn't argue that point, and for the simple fact that I believe that when God created all of creation, the maturity of it was built into it all. For example, like you were just speaking to the last gentleman about the time and the time it takes for light to travel to Earth. The reason that we're able to see light the way that we are is because Earth had to be present in its current position for enough time for the light to actually be able to travel and reach it. So it only makes sense that when God actually made creation, he factored the maturity of the different parts of creation into the equation when he made it. I think people kind of start off with the mindset that everything God created has to start off at some stage of some sort of infancy in order for God to create. When in reality, if God can create it all, he can create everything that he makes with a certain level of maturity and age already pre-built.
Yeah. So why would God make it so that there was light that was already on the way from galaxies that are 10 billion light years away?
Well, scripture talks about how God created everything to ultimately bring glory to him and also show the capability, his capacity and control over all that exists.
Okay, but that doesn't explain why specifically he would make galaxies that appear like they're 10 billion light years away, or that they're giving off light 10 billion light years away.
Well, there's actually scripture for that. He actually talks about how all of creation ultimately glorifies him, and he created it that way because he's the creator. Now,
But this
if
is,
I understand the sense of your question correctly, that would be something that we could only ask God.
well, it's a little bit confusing because it's that kind of thing which actually drives people away from the belief in God. So how does
Why do you
that
say that?
bring him
Why do you
glory?
say that?
Well, for example, if the fact that we see light that appears as if it's been traveling for billions of years is fairly compelling evidence to a lot of people that the Earth or that the universe is billions of years old.
And I wouldn't disagree of the maturity of creation. I would not disagree with that. So, and let me
I'm not
kind of
talking
give
about
you a little bit
maturity.
of
I'm
a
talking about the way that people perceive this data suggests that it's actually billions of years old, not that it just is young but has the appearance of age.
So when God said, "Let there be light,"
Mm-hmm.
that's all light coming into existence at the same time. So that doesn't mean let there be light and then it has to travel before anyone can see it. Do you see what I'm
Right, but
saying?
but if the goal is to bring glory to God, and God produced a universe in a way that leads people away from God, it seems like he's not achieving his ends.
Well, how would it not seem like it's achieving his ends when
Because
he
the
creates
evidence
a
that he left
universe?
behind, the universe he created, drives people away from him.
No, it doesn't drive people away from him. If anything, I would kind of counter your proposal because if God created a whole universe that's supposed to testify to his glory and magnificence and existence, yet we can't see it because light hasn't traveled yet, the millions of light years that would be necessary for us to see it on Earth, how would that indeed glorify him?
So most of the stars that we can see with our eyes are within a few thousand light years. So in fact, we would be able to see them. Almost
No,
every single star that we can see just in the sky with just by looking up, we would be able to see. Even if
it, and
even if it was the Earth was created as if it was brand new, right?
okay,
Just 6,000 years ago, and no light was created while traveling.
I don't disagree with that.
We would be able to see basically everything that we can currently see. The only thing
Exactly.
that we wouldn't be able to see are the ultra distant galaxies that required enormous telescopes to detect.
Which we've for to a certain degree we've been able to kind of perceive or observe.
For about 100 years.
Yeah, roughly.
But look, those observations are the kinds of observations that have led cosmologists to be overwhelmingly atheist.
I would not agree with that.
I
For
mean,
example,
so
right?
so it is just the case that cosmologists are overwhelmingly atheist,
Well, maybe
right?
now, but not in not when and
Starting
it's not.
when we started being able to observe other galaxies, that's when that
Mhm.
started. That's when the trend towards secular positions amongst like cosmologists and scientists more generally began,
Okay, so
like in
okay,
the
for
early 1900s.
for a point of curiosity, then what would you say was the main portion of cosmology? What were they observing that was necessarily making them atheists in your belief?
So roughly the and we can only speculate because like nobody was taking data on this back then, but the this kind of phenomenon probably started with Copernicus, but significantly less so a while ago. So Copernicus, Copernicus, Kepler, all of these folks in the 15 and 16 and 1700s, showing that we're not the center of the universe, right? So Earth was demoted from being the center of the universe, everything orbiting the Earth, to the sun being the center of the universe. Now, that's still plausible under a God model, or under a model where God exists. But then if you then find out that the sun isn't the center of the universe, but it's just one star amongst billions in a galaxy, well, now you think that Earth is significantly less important. And then if you find out that our galaxy isn't even that special, in fact, our galaxy is one galaxy amongst billions. And then if you find out that our galaxy it's small, or it's fairly small, it's fairly ordinary, our star is fairly small, it's fairly ordinary, you find planets all over the place, it just removes us from being special more and more, and it decenters humanity. And the biblical position is that humanity is very much at the center. And so it's at least plausible to me, it's at least makes sense to me that as our view of humanity got diminished, as our specialness decreased, the amount of people who took, the biblical account seriously also decreased with it.
Okay, so I want to make sure I understand you correctly. You're saying that the biblical view or the biblical breakdown says that Earth is at the literal center of the universe, and because as we've learned more, that view has been decentralized and disproven to a degree.
So roughly, I mean, it's not clear in the Bible if it says the Earth is literally the center, but what is clear in the Bible is that humanity is central to the story, right? Humans were created on the
Yes.
last day of creation, for example, right? Humans were granted dominion. And so the moment humanity gets decentered, because we realize not only are we at the center, not only are we not at the center of the universe, our star isn't at the center of the universe, our galaxy isn't at the center of the universe, our galaxy isn't special, there are other planets. All of these factors just remove humans from being the center of the story. At
I
least
think
when you
that's
take the
more
data
a
in its
matter of
entirety.
I would say that that's more a matter of feeling an opinion, because one of the things that Scripture is very clear about is that when it comes to life, not just the planet or the sun, God's focus is on Earth. And if you look around, we have not found any life on Earth and on any other planet, on any other rock or anything else in the universe yet. We have not found life there yet at all. So
Well,
because of
that's
that,
that's maybe debatable, by the way. But
well,
anyway.
we see that's the thing. If we're talking about certainties right now, if we're going to keep this an evidence based,
Mhm.
conversation, we have not found any evidence on any Earth on
Well,
any other
we have
planet.
found evidence of life on Mars. It's not like
Well,
100% proof, but like we definitely have found
well,
evidence of life on Mars.
well. If we're going to go based off of 100% proof, we have 100% proof that we have life on Earth, and we don't have 100% proof that there's life anywhere else, which is in keeping with the biblical breakdown that Earth is the focus of God and the focus of in the centrality of His focus when it comes to creation.
Yeah. So look, and I understand that. Yeah, the centrality of the creation is on humans in the biblical account. I'm just giving you an explanation as to why, because I mean, it just is the case that cosmologists are overwhelmingly atheist. That's just like a fact of the
But
matter
but but
amongst.
cosmologists, would you say that cosmologists, because let's say if they were all atheists, for example, right? Would that then change the nature of creation?
No. So the only reason I brought this up was because the reason why I started talking about like this kind of decentralization of Earth is because you asked, why do you think it is that like cosmologists are like overwhelmingly atheist. And so I was just giving
Okay.
like a plausible explanation, because we know that this kind of shift away from like theistic science to secular science happened in the early 20th century, right? You
That's
started
true.
like in the
I see where you're coming from.
yeah. So that's why I was giving that explanation. Now the point is the people who study, and the reason I brought up cosmologists being overwhelmingly atheist is because cosmologists, and to some extent, are like the people who study the universe. Oh, where'd he go? Oh, welcome back. Are the people who study like the universe and like the shape of the shape and evolution of the universe most closely. Like that is their field of study. And so if the claim is that creation was intended to express the glory of God, to glorify God, then you would think that the people who study his creation most intently would not be overwhelmingly atheist. But the fact that that is the case means that it seems like God's intentions were not realized.
Well, not, but see, now I love that you said this, because not realized, but you have to finish the rest of that statement. Amongst who? Because if you're talking to people who are of the faith and do look at
I'm
creation
talking
from a
amongst the
biblical
people who study
lens,
it.
well, that's the thing. God can only be fully appreciated through a lens of faith. If you're looking to try to appreciate God in His nature as a spiritual being, but you're trying to use the physical to actually do that, you're automatically capped and limited to how much of God you can even appreciate. Would you not agree?
Well, no, I wouldn't agree. So, look, if the goal was to glorify God, then one would think that if the goal of creation was to glorify God, meaning that God made this so that there would be more glory for him, right? That's kind of what
Hmm.
glorification means. Well, I guess the best way that God can get more glory is by having more people worship him, right? Like that is the means by
No.
which God is glorified.
Well, God's glory and God being glorified happened before creation, and will always continue to happen. What I'm saying
So
is
what do you mean
this.
by glorified then? Because maybe you and I are thinking about that term in different ways.
So, like for example, right now, if you were to ask, let's say, a room of 20 to 30 different people what they believe is the reason or the way creation came about, you're going to get a number of different opinions. So
Mm-hmm.
you might have some people that say, some kind of unexplainable phenomenon may have taken place. Some people might say Big Bang Theory, or some people might say a being outside of time, space, and matter who was able to put all of time, space, and matter together, created what we perceive. So, depending on the perception of the person, that's going to automatically limit or expand or just narrow what they believe the existence that we're currently living in right now is really all about. So, your view, your lens in which you look at creation is ultimately going to dictate how you feel about what you perceive. So, you have some people that believe that, hey, science explains creation. I don't agree to that. I believe creation existed before science, and science is trying its best to understand creation.
So look, I don't know how that answered my question. I just don't know what
I'll
you
tell you
mean
what.
by what do you mean by glorify?
Glorify as in basically attributing the magnificence and capacity and the awesomeness of God to him.
Right. So in order for God to be more glorified, you would need more people
Yes.
doing that attribution, right?
Yes, but God already said in his word that not everyone will do that because of free will, some of us will choose not to. Some of us will choose to look at all that is good about God and say, you know what? I'd rather do evil because it seems more fun.
That's kind of irrelevant though. Like if the goal
No,
if
no, no, it's not irrelevant though,
testimony
because how we
testimony
feel about what we perceive changes how we explain it.
Look, my point is that if God's goal in creation was to glorify him, meaning
Yes.
to have more people appreciate and attribute what he did to him, right?
Yes.
i.e., God created the universe so that more people would believe in him, would attribute the creation of the universe with him. Well, then
Not
he's
so
failed.
that. No, no, not
So
so
then what does
that
it
we
mean
would.
what does it mean for God created everything to glorify him?
It's not that he created it just so that it would. It's just so that it testifies to him. It's a
So
testimony. It's
why
not to
did
say
God
that
create it then?
everyone
Why
who.
did God create
It's
these
not to say
distant
that.
galaxies?
So it's not that just because it exists and you look at it and you see it means you automatically will attribute it to God. That's not what I'm saying.
So why did God create these distant galaxies?
It's a test. Tell you what, let me give you the Bible verse for it instead, because I don't want to. Give me a second. Give me just a second.
Okie doke.
So let's say, for example, if you were to go to Psalms 19, chapter 19, verse 1, it says, "The heavens declare the glory of God, and proclaim and the skies proclaim the works of his hands."
So when you say they proclaim, like I understand that this is a metaphor. When we say that, like the skies proclaim the glory of God, right? What my understanding of that? Sorry, I just got a text message. My understanding of that verse is something along the lines of the beauty, or their appearance, or some feature of them will lead people to believe that God is glorious. Something like that, right?
Sort of, more
like the sky can't literally talk, but the sky is in some sense telling people that God is glorious.
Yes.
And yet, what seems to be the case is that you take people who are otherwise undecided, perhaps. They go out and they look at the sky, or perhaps they were Christians. They go out, they look at the sky, they study the universe, and they come out not believing that God is glorious, but believing that God doesn't exist.
Well, again,
it seems like that it's just the opposite of what God is saying.
But the same is true for the people that do look at the sky, the universe, Earth, and all that exists, and are in complete awe. So the same is that statement can be said on either side of the discussion.
All I'm saying is that it's very surprising that if it were the case that God created the sky to glorify him, it would be very surprising that when then people look at the sky, they end up at the opposite conclusion.
Well, that's not surprising at all when you look at it from a biblical lens. For example, if we go all the way back to Genesis, the way that we were supposed to perceive, God, creation, and the relationship that we were supposed to have with God has been completely broken down because we fell into sin. And because we fell into sin, now we are more prone to rejecting God than we are to accepting God, who God is, goodness, or anything that he created. We don't appreciate God anywhere near the capacity or the way that we were supposed to from day one in Genesis. That's a
But
very
then it just means that the way that he created the universe doesn't do what he wanted it to do.
No, it's not. That's not what it means. Again, I go back to Genesis, the fall that happened in the garden from the level of our very nature turned us away from God.
Sure.
So now when we
the sky doesn't do what he wants it to do.
When we perceive, no, it's not. This guy doesn't do what it wants us to do. Now we look at goodness and we still reject it from time to time because now we have a nature that does not seek to honor and glorify God the way it was supposed to.
Look, it's just not.
We've corrupted ourselves,
and that's fine. But the sky is still not doing what God wanted it to do.
To some people, but it is doing it for others.
To most cosmologists.
And right now, I believe you would agree that if everybody said that carbon dating is not a form of science, that would be wrong, correct?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Let's say if everyone said carbon dating is not a form of science, would that be wrong?
If everybody said that carbon dating is not a form of science,
yes.
Yeah, they'd be wrong.
They would be wrong, but carbon dating is still a form of science. So what I'm saying is,
I'm not appealing to popularity here.
It doesn't matter how many people feel something.
I'm not appealing to popularity here. I'm not making an argument ad populum. Like that's not what I'm doing. I'm not saying all the science.
I'm not saying that it's not bringing God glory.
I'm not saying, cosmologists are atheists, therefore cosmologists are correct. What I'm saying is that it is surprising that the people who study the thing that's supposed to bring God glory the most are the people who are overwhelmingly atheist. That's
Well, look,
surprising.
honestly,
So look, so testimony, if it's the case that some people were turned away from, like humanity was turned away from God, and that, we have free will and all of this, you would think that most people who don't study this stuff, they would be atheist, and then the people who dig deep, they would be the people that would find God. But it's the opposite that happens.
I don't believe that most people look at the skies and are not in awe and wonder of
The people
creation.
who study them, by the way, the
And
people like the cosmologists, the people who study the universe as a whole, these people are significantly less likely to believe in God than the average population.
okay, so okay, if you're not making a popularity argument, then you're basically trying to say that on some level that cosmologists are some sort of arbiters of truth in some way, or
Nope,
some
it's not
type
the
of
argument I'm making.
perception in some way, then
What I'm
because you're
saying is
trying
that there's
to.
something unexpected happening. Like, look, let me give an analogy that maybe will help explain my view. So if I said, let's say that I'm a designer, right? I design, or maybe I'm an inventor of some kind, right? Actually, no.
Mhm.
Let's say I'm a game developer, right? I design a game I design a game with the intent that with the goal that it's like this really deep thing, and it has like all of these layers and stuff, and I leave little Easter eggs in various places for people to go find, just because I like really want to like I want to imbue myself into the game that I make. Now, one would think that the casuals, the people who are just playing the game like, for half an hour a night with their buddies or whatever, the casuals, they're not going to notice all of the deep features that I left behind to impart myself onto the game. But the people who are dedicated to the game, the people who play it for 8 hours a day, whatever, we would expect that they would be the people who would see all of the Easter eggs, who would get all of the little messages I left behind for them, just because they're the deepest into the game. They are the most familiar with how things work. They're the ones who spend the most time thinking about it. And so one would expect that the people who study it the most would pick up on these details the most effectively. And similarly, we would expect that if God's goal with the sky was to glorify him, was to send a message that he is glorious, then you'd think the people who study the sky the most would be the people who would pick up on that message most effectively. But we see the
Okay,
opposite.
so here's what I want to say first off. I always go into every discussion trying to be as open-minded as possible, because I always take the stance that I could learn something from you even if I don't agree with you. So we took the presupposition that cosmologists are the vast majority of them are atheists, when anyone can go Google right now, and I challenge anyone in the actual chat to go Google the fact that no, not all cosmologists are atheists. As
I
a
never
matter
said
of
all.
fact,
I never
it's a
said all.
mix of it's a mix of and agnostic,
Here, let me show
religious.
you
Some of them
something.
are atheists. So you have a whole mix, just like you do in any other scientific practice, right?
Let me show you
So
something.
so yeah, go for it.
Here's a paper.
But look again, and all you would need. But here's the thing: if we can't get specific ratios and percentages of who believes in what, then
I can get you those if you
again
want.
we're talking. We're going back to what I was saying before. We're going based off of feelings, and we're also
Do you want me to
attributing
get you
to
that?
cosmologists. Give me a second though. If we're attributing to cosmologists some sort of, hey, because they study this field, their opinion has more weight than
We're not
everybody
talking about their
else's.
opinion. We're
Or
talking
yeah,
about the
how
fact that they are the most likely to, if God was actually doing this, we're talking about the fact that they are the most likely people to come to that conclusion, because
I
they're the
would
people
not
who
agree
study it
with
the
that
most.
statement though, because unless we can actually speak to cosmologists and actually converse with
You're
them,
speaking to one
and
right now, by the way.
yeah, but you don't represent all cosmologists. So
So
what I'm
then why
saying
did you
is,
say unless we can speak to cosmologists?
and plural, and not individual. If
So
unless we could actually speak to them and get
would
a
you be interested in
percentage.
knowing that, as of, so are you familiar with the National Academy of Science?
Yes.
Okay, so the National Academy of Sciences is in some sense like, it's like the elite membership for, like, it's like
Hmm.
these are scientists at the top of their field. These aren't your like just everyday scientists. So there was a study
Hmm.
conducted in 1998. I can show it to you right now. I have it pulled up. There's this. Oops, this is the wrong one. Sorry, one sec. There was a study conducted in 1998. Here we go. this was like it's less a study and more like a survey, because it's not like there's not a whole lot to do here. So they basically sampled a large population of members of the National Academy of Science, and what they found in 1998 was that 72%, I can zoom in, 72% had personal disbelief in a personal God in 1998. 20.8% had doubt or agnosticism, and only 7% of these people who are members of the National Academy of Sciences believe in a personal God.
Again, now you're again, so I'm going to keep on going back to this. You're saying that because of these people being in this field that study this specific thing, their opinion, because they study this, has more weight, correct?
Nope, that's not. Look, the only reason I brought this up was because you were doubting the data that I was claiming that the vast majority of cosmologists don't believe in God.
Well, no, I didn't say. Listen, so here's what I'm
I
explaining.
mean, you did. You brought that into question, so I showed you a paper and I showed you a study.
Let me explain this to you. So again, the part that I'm focusing on is this. You're saying that because cosmologists who are in the field of a specific study, that you feel they're supposed to be able to be the most receptive of God's glory in creation, right?
Well, yeah, they're the people who study the cosmos, right?
Okay.
That's who cosmologists are.
Yes, and I'm confirming what you're saying because I want to make sure I understand your point of view. You're saying that because they study, so you're saying because cosmologists are in that specific study, they're the ones that are supposed to be most receptive of what God created to be, to testify to His glory. Correct?
Well, it's hard to
That's
say
what
what
you're
they're
saying.
so not quite. So it's hard to say what each individual cosmologist's personal disposition is when they go into the field, right? Like it's just hard to say. Like presumably people who go into cosmology, at least setting demographics aside, are probably a pretty even distribution of people who believe in God, who don't believe in God, whatever. They're probably a pretty even slice of the population of whatever country you're in. The point is when they come out, when they come out, they're much more likely to be atheist. When they finish their PhD, when they do their research, whatever. When you ask a cosmologist later in their career, they're more likely to be atheist. That's the point.
But if I could make the argument that right now, if you send if you send any kid to any of these liberal colleges right now, they're most likely to come out a liberal, left leaning. We can make that argument as
You're
well.
right, you could, and that's because when you get more informed on the facts, you end up liberal.
No, come on, man. Okay, so you're saying that all of a sudden, as colleges have become more liberal, all of a sudden the graduates now are coming out overwhelmingly more liberal. That it has nothing to do with the beliefs of the institutions themselves.
So I don't know what it means for an institution to have a belief. What I can tell you is that professors, people who teach at these institutions, are generally more left-leaning and are generally more secular than the the average population of, say, the United States. Now, the reason for that is very, very interesting. I'm sure that there's plenty of studies to try to understand why it is the case that people who are more highly educated are more likely to, or are less likely to believe in God and are more likely to be left-leaning. That's a whole separate conversation. But the fact of the matter is, this was true.
It's not separate because the point that I'm making
it's not separate. Okay.
The institutions that are teaching the so-called graduates of the future, graduates that are in these specific studies, have not only politically but overwhelmingly become more left-leaning. So now you have the belief of abortions being okay has skyrocketed. What was it just recently? Jordan Peterson, now they classified what he was saying as hate speech when he wasn't even attacking genders per se. But what happened was because the political and
it seems like a very big pivot.
Shifted. Say it again.
It just seems like a big pivot. It seems like now you're ranting against liberal institutions.
What I'm saying is, if the point of view of the institutions and the popular narratives play a huge role in how their graduates view whatever particular area of study that they're coming from. You don't agree?
Look, so the issue is that we need to talk about the origin of this phenomenon. It wasn't always the case. Like if you go back 100 years ago, it wasn't always the case that most cosmologists or most people who like most astronomers believed in God. That just wasn't always the case. And so somehow it shifted to the case that now it is the case. So why is that the case? Maybe it's because we've learned more about the world.
tell you what, let me, because you have the benefit of bringing up studies that you already have, uh, set before you. I want to make sure I look up a few things just to make sure as well. So we have, let's see, Galileo was Catholic, Sir Isaac
Yeah.
Newton.
So prior to the 20th
So
century, most of these people were very religious. It was very common to be a scientist and be very religious prior to the 20th century. Now the question
why
is,
do you think that's so?
so I can't comment on like sociology or like like biologists or whatever.
But we
But
are
hold
though.
on.
But that's essentially what our discussion is
Hold on.
about.
I'm not. Please let me finish. As far as why astronomy and cosmology shifted so suddenly, because it's a very dramatic shift. Like if you go look at like chemists are like less likely to be atheists than like cosmologists are, right? So it's
Wait,
very
for a second, well,
dramatic.
could you elaborate on that? Could you expand on that real quick?
Yeah, like cosmologists are like one of the most atheist groups
No, I'm saying, well,
among
chemists. So, like,
scientists.
what is it that makes them different from chemists? Out of
Oh,
curiosity.
it's just a different field of science.
Well, no, is there anything? Is there anything specific that
Yeah,
makes it
I was
different?
getting to that. So the point is that cosmologists, these are people who study our lack of centrality in the universe, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not surprising that people who study and understand how very unspecial we are, how very typical our planet is, our star is, our galaxy is, the people who study that, of course they're going to come to the conclusion that, oh, we're just
So,
not that special.
but that we I thought we talked about that part already. We have 100% evidence that there's life on Earth, and we have no certainty at all that there's life on any other planet or ever was
Look,
life on any other planet.
so
And
I'm
you're saying
not.
that that's not special?
You'll have to talk to the 90% of cosmologists as to why
But,
they don't think Earth is special.
but,
I'm just telling you
wait,
what the conclusion. I'm just telling you why cosmologists likely ended up the way that they currently are.
okay, but I want to make sure I say this because I want to understand. I want to make sure I'm on the same page with you. You're saying that in this universe, that then the known universe that we're able to perceive, we have 100% evidence that life only exists on Earth, and that doesn't make Earth special.
Look, I believe that Earth is a pretty special place. I'm telling you why cosmology ended up the way that it is.
Well, I would say this.
I'm
Every
giving you an
cosmologist,
explanation as to why there are certain beliefs. You might say that those beliefs are
look,
ill-formed, but that's irrelevant for why those beliefs exist to begin with.
here's my thing. 100% of cosmologists could say that Earth isn't special. And just normal observation from what even cosmologists would agree to, life only exists on Earth. That is
Okay.
beyond more special than anything else, any other metric you could bring up.
Well, I mean, if Earth was literally the center of the universe, that'd probably be more special.
I
Like,
don't know. The center of the universe that you're referring to, I thought I explained that from the biblical lens as well. That's the center of God's focus in creation,
no, I know,
not
but I'm
the
saying
literal
you're not
center.
understanding. If the Earth was literally the center, that would definitely bolster this view that like, oh, humanity is special somehow.
Over the existence of life?
Yeah, because like it was announced like a
Really?
month or two ago that like there is now pretty strong evidence of microscopic life on Mars, for
Okay,
example.
so let's go back to the centrality point that you made. So figuring out the point of the universe that's at the center is more special than life
Look, I
existing
mean, like
only out on
it
Earth.
could it just depends on your views. Like if you think one is more special than the other, that's like a subjective thing. All I'm saying is,
That's
and
subjective.
yeah, of course it's subjective.
So so what is it that's so significant about the center, the center of the universe over life?
Look, this is just like you're asking like why some people think that one thing is more important
No,
than
no, no,
another thing. That's a
not
subjective question.
no. That's not my question. Because you seem from what you're saying, if I and correct me if I'm wrong, you're saying that there's an extreme significance about what's at the center of the universe, right?
If it were the case that the Earth were at the center, then it would be very, very surprising that the Earth is at the center. So we would have
Okay,
good reason to think that the Earth is in fact special.
so Earth would need to be at the center of the universe to carry the same special
That's
significance that it has now.
It's not at all what I'm saying. And this is like a complete pivot, and it's a complete derailment.
No,
The
it's not
reason,
a pivot.
because
It's not a pivot
whether or
because
not you think the Earth is actually special, whether or not you think the cosmologists are wrong, is irrelevant for the point that I'm making. Namely, the people who study this stuff for their day job, they are
yes,
people who are less likely to believe that God is glorious,
and
and
they're
that
just
should
as
be
prone,
surprising to you.
but they're just as prone to being wrong as everybody else.
Yeah, but
If one of the
they are the
core,
ones that you would expect to be least likely to be wrong about this, because they
if
spend their time studying this. That's their day job.
but as a cosmologist yourself, you stated that the thing that would have made this pivot the other way is if Earth was at the center of the universe,
Hmm.
that would make it special enough to warrant the.
That would have stopped my guess, and I'm speculating because we're talking about sociology from 100 years ago. But my guess is if, in the if in the early 1900s we found that, all of the galaxies are orbiting around our galaxy, and all of the stars in our galaxy are orbiting around our star, and then that would definitely point to, there's something special here. That would definitely make people lean the other direction, I would speculate. Yeah.
Okay, well, again, that I would say that's a matter of opinion,
Yes, it
but
is.
I guess the only argument that I would make is that the location of our universe in comparison to life only existing on Earth is there's a very that's unbalanced. And my that's how I feel about it.
to
I
be
feel like
to be clear,
I feel
and
like Earth being at the center of the universe
I
and
think
Earth being the only planet that we know of that has actual life on it is way more significant than what's at the center of the
so
universe.
just to be clear, we've checked like 3 places for life ish. And we found evidence of life on one of the ones that's not Earth. So to say that, like, we know that there's life on Earth, we do know that there's life on Earth, and that we don't know that there's life anywhere else, like, that's like saying, uh, what would be a good
But
analogy for this?
we're reaching
That
now,
would be
though, because now
that
you're using the lack of evidence as evidence.
I'm not doing that. That would be like going to like a Chinese restaurant, and then
Hmm.
dipping your hand into the lobster, like the lobster the lobster tank, like dipping your hand
Yeah.
into the lobster tank and being like, huh, what are the odds that a lobster's in here? Like, we've only really checked like a few places besides the lobster tank. So to
So,
say, like, we just don't know. We just don't know how common
well,
life is, how rare life is.
well, see, I don't agree with that because cosmologists have stated that not only do certain conditions need to be met to even sustain life, but off of observation alone, we're able to observe a number of planets or other spatial bodies that don't meet the conditions to sustain life.
So to be clear, we don't have the tech or the observational ability to check whether other planets outside of our solar system have life. We don't have the ability to do that. What we can do is we can kind of like we can like get indirect measurements of the spectrum of the atmospheres of some particular exoplanets and check whether those atmospheres might contain certain chemicals that might be related to life or not. But that's the best that we can do, at least as it stands. Like, the only places that we've actually checked for life are Mars, the moon, and kind of Venus. Not even really Venus, but like maybe, and then of course Earth. And we now have evidence of life on Mars. It's not definitive, but we do have evidence of life on Mars. We have no evidence of life on the moon. And like, we know that rocky planets are common, planets like Earth. Those are very common. We know that most stars have planets. On average, each star has like 1 or 2 planets or something like this. And so the requirements for life, that it's a certain distance from its star, that it's, not a gaseous planet,
Mhm.
these things are actually very, very common. Now, what we don't know is we don't know how rare it is to actually find life on places where those conditions are met. That's a question that we just don't know the answer to yet. It might be far more common than we think, given that we've now found evidence of life on Mars, and that would be two planets in one solar system. But it's still up in the air.
Okay, so with that being said, I guess my question for you would it be rational to make an assumption that based on what we know right now, that there is or is not life on those other planets?
It would be rational to assume that
if you had to lean towards one.
I have a high degree of certainty that there is life elsewhere in the universe, and I'm speculating here, but I would suspect that if you asked like any astrophysicist or any cosmologist, they would probably agree with me.
Okay, that's interesting. So I would definitely be open to exploring that. I would say, but just going back over to what we were originally speaking on, the point that we were originally speaking on. Look, cosmologists are prone to being wrong just as anybody else is. When it comes down to the evidence of what Scripture says and versus the point that you brought up about the 6,000 years old, I would say that Earth is at least 6,000 years old. And I believe that the maturity of creation was built into it. For example, Adam wasn't, and when Adam was made, he wasn't made an infant; he was made a man. So, with that being said, Adam was made with age. He wasn't made an infant who just laid on the garden in the middle of the field, in the middle of a field somewhere. So, because Scripture points to that in terms of as a ramification as to how God went about creating creation, I think it's very fair to say that all of creation had its age built into it when God created it.
Yeah.
It didn't
So
when God said let there be light, it didn't he didn't say let there be light and then
I
light had
understand you
to
don't need to
travel
preach.
before it could be perceived. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. So, and I guess we can call it here.
Yeah.
But I just want to point out that the original, and just to kind of bring us full circle, the original claim was that, oh, well, the universe looks old because God made it appear with age. And we ended up down this rabbit hole of why God created it this way, why God created it so it looks like it has age, even though it doesn't.
Well, I didn't say it looks like it has age, but does it? But it doesn't. I never said
well,
that.
No, I mean, it does, like the age of something is how long a thing has existed. So like it looks like it's mature, even though it hasn't existed for long enough to reach that level of maturity on its own, right?
What I'm saying is God created with age. So Adam
well,
wasn't
okay,
made
that's
infinite.
a separate issue. That doesn't even make sense. Age is how long something has existed, so it's impossible to create something with age. But you can create something with the appearance of age, certainly.
It's impossible for us in
No,
our understanding.
it's like
If
logically
God,
impossible to create something with age, right? Like
so you're saying
age is defined as the
created,
length of time that something has existed. A thing cannot have existed for longer than it's existed.
So when God made Adam, Adam was a man.
He was mature and he was an adult, but he was still 0 years old.
When I say age, I'm referring to the maturity in that.
Yeah. So that's why I say the appearance of age. Appearance
but
of age.
Maturity doesn't mean the appearance, because remember,
sure it does.
Saying so you're saying that, okay? So are you saying that carbon dating would be different because God made it mature already?
Yeah, that's presumably what you believe.
No, I'm asking you. So carbon dating would be different, even though God already made it with maturity. So
I don't think
God made it with maturity. With the way we measure with carbon dating be different because God made it with maturity already.
Well, if your view is that God can make things with maturity, then you can't use carbon dating whatsoever to come to any correct conclusions, because you don't know if the thing was created with maturity a week ago or 10,000 years ago. Like, it's just impossible to come to any correct conclusions because you just can't know. And look, that's the issue. The issue is that if God creates things with maturity, then God is essentially placing evidence of something's age while not actually being that age, while the thing is not actually that old, which is that's a type of deception. Now, you could say that some kinds of deception are reasonable. You wouldn't want Adam to be created as an infant, because then he would just die. He couldn't fend for himself. So it's not deception. It's just because there's no goal to convince otherwise of what's true. Adam was just created with age or with maturity because he needs to, so that he can function. But unless there's a necessary explanation for why God created, say, lead in high ratios in zircon crystals, light traveling from galaxies 10 billion light years away, unless there's an explanation for those things, then it just seems like deception, which is the typical explanation.
I don't agree with the deception part, because wouldn't you agree that time, space, and matter had to come into existence all at the same time?
No.
Okay, so if you have matter, where would you put it?
So to be clear, at least in classical understandings, you need space at least, perhaps time, for matter to exist, but you don't need matter for space and time to exist.
No, I'm saying
I also don't think that there was nothing and then there was something. That's not my view.
But okay, out of curiosity, what is your view then?
I'm pretty agnostic about it. I think that there was never nothing, though.
So
But look,
there was never nothing, but then something came out of.
no, no,
Then
there
where
there
that then where
wasn't
the
there wasn't
original
nothing.
something
There
come
was never
from?
nothing.
Okay, there was never nothing, but then how did we get arrived to something?
Because there's always something. At every
So
moment of
where'd
time,
that
there was
something come
something.
from? What's the origins of that something then?
I don't think that there was like I don't think that there was an origin where there was nothing and then there was something. It's not my view.
So you don't believe in the beginning then?
Well, it's a little bit complicated. I don't think that there was ever nothing. I think it's possible that there was a first moment of time, but that there could have been a timeless existence before that. But anyway, testimony. We are getting off topic, and I do want to move on to another guest. But thank you so much for being here.
Cool.
It was a delight.
Yeah, I appreciate you conversing with me.
Have a good one.